Hello and welcome. My name is Meepolis and this is Literally Graphic. Today I am going to be talking about Aya Volume 1 by Marguerite Abouet. Talking about the story a little bit, it definitely felt like an introduction. There were just enough characters to be a little bit confusing maybe at first for some people, myself included, but by the end of the story they're definitely highly differentiated just because Aya and all of her friends and family and their family all have very different personalities. The plot itself was pretty fun and frolicsome, nothing too serious, even though the characters were definitely dealing with some of those real life issues that, you know, were, say, in Babysitter's Club. I know I compared the two in the TBR video, but Aya was definitely a bit more mature. There wasn't any, like, graphic content, but there was, like, you know, some talk about sex. There was one sort of suggestion of a couple of someone's father going dancing with one of Aya's friends, and then some talk of an abortion too, so appealing more for the teen demographic. But it did have a very similar feel, and that's kind of what I guess I was reading, having not read either of the books at that point, kind of the jive I was getting. Personally, there wasn't a whole lot that Aya's friends, especially, and I had in common, but that's mostly just because of my kind of almost puritanical upbringing and the fact that I was pretty removed from the 70s. So culturally we come from very different spaces, but you know, I definitely felt like there was a lot of relatability between, you know, general American culture and then general Ivory Coast culture, and I definitely think that's really important, you know, in helping people, you know, build bridges and bonding and telling different kinds of stories. The 70s was a very interesting time in the history of the Ivory Coast, and it was definitely a time of prosperity, even if it did end up being, I believe, a bit of a bubble, and, you know, things have changed a lot since then. Marguerite herself was actually born in the Ivory Coast and grew up during this time, so definitely felt like she lent the whole book a definite air of authenticity for all of its larger-than-life characters and some plot lines that were sometimes described as a bit soap opera-y, though I think that's a little bit over the top, honestly. Overly dramatic perhaps on the part of a few reviewers. It definitely felt real. Plus, I now have one more country down on my list of trying to read as many different countries as possible. But she was actually only the author of the book. The artist of the book, Clément Aubry something. Again, I am trying to learn French at the present moment, but pronunciation still eludes me. Anyway, he is a French author. The art style really reminded me a lot of Little Vampire and The Rabbi's Cat, which were also written and drawn by a Frenchman, Juan Sfar, maybe? Clément has a similar color palette going on, especially in comparison to The Rabbi's Cat, which actually took place in the Middle East, I believe. Kind of very vibrant, but very deep and earthy kind of tones. So very rich coloring with, again, to match the larger-than-life characters that I mentioned earlier. It's a little bit cartoonish, a little bit caricatured, like just a tiny bit, to really, you know, do them justice. If it was any more realistic, it would definitely feel like the characters weren't fully expressing themselves. The slightly quirky art style really expresses the tone of the characters. Also the way that he draws out the comic panels in kind of a slightly wobbly, definitely not cookie cutter shapes is very similar to The Rabbi's Cat as well, and it made it feel a lot more hand done, which was really cool too, and matches again the style overall. So overall, yeah, I really enjoyed it. I'll definitely be picking up the next couple of volumes. It seems like it might actually still be ongoing, and at least not all the volumes available seem to be in English yet, but I know that they're definitely working on that. She was actually at TCAF, so I saw her and was reminded that I've been meaning to read this book for forever. I would definitely not recommend this to people who are uncomfortable with, you know, teenage girls being in full possession of their sexuality. I could tell reading through a lot of the reviews that some people were definitely off put by that, and we could dig more into that later, but it's a thing, so be warned. I did rate this, but I did end up rating this book 4 out of 5 stars. So, I will talk to you later. Goodbye. And as always, Literally Graphic is recorded on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and Anishinaabe people, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat Nation. I live here because of British colonization, Indigenous genocide, and more geographically specific, Treaty 13, also known as the Toronto Purchase, which was finalized in 1805 between representatives of the Crown and certain Mississauga peoples. This treaty was a lie and has since been broken many times over. Saying so reflects only my own small steps towards knowing the truth and does nothing for reconciliation.